Good evening. We interrupt your daily public broadcasting for a special report coming to you from Citrus Corner as part of Orange Grove 55. The Double Ds are at it again. The conflicting feud between Disney and DeSantis intensifies over Reedy Creek that could potentially spread into the resort itself. Also, we will be discussing the latest news and info on Walt Disney World, Disney Cruise Line, and even a little bit on Epic Universe. We promise you a good, clean presentation with no crude, obnoxious, spontaneous, or sarcastic humor, and absolutely, positively, no cursing. Yeah, right. Who are we kidding? Let's have some fun in the sun on Citrus Corner as part of OG 55. Hey everyone, welcome back to Citrus Corner as part of Orange Grove 55. I got my brothers here with me, my partners in crime. Always a good time to have some lengthy, juicy discussions. I'm going to start down below with the man who wears many hats, has more hats than the Mad Hatter himself, Dr. Dre the DA, Mr. Vash Sky. How are you today, sir?
Doing very well, thank you. Just catching up on today's stories and the stories that have they've culminated to something very interesting over the last few days. So it's a very interesting day. Also going over stuff from Star Wars Celebration, a lot of fun. But I am so happy to talk about some stories involving both Walt Disney World Resort and the cruise line business. It's a very kind of interesting day here on Citrus Corner, so it should be a lot of fun. Thank you for having me so much, good sir, of course. If anybody wants to follow me, they can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky. Just go ahead and type it in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55. We have some amazing shows, including our coverage of every single Mandalorian episode as it comes out with Story Geeks with Jay. The one you're watching right now, so it's Citrus Corner, hosted by the person right up there, Orange Nerd and Orange Grove 55, the original flavors, hosted by good sir right up there, and my own, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice and news and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove.
Thank you, sir. And of course, the person right beside me here needs no introduction, but hell, we're going to give him one anyway. He is the Snow White of the channel, if you will, the one that started it all, Mr. Orange Grove 55 himself. How are you today, sir?
Doing very well. Thank you, George, for having me. I can't wait to talk all about Florida, Walt Disney World, DeSantis. It's going to be a really, really great show. Thank you, brother, for having me on. And just to kick us off,
nothing can stop us now.
There we go. Take it away, sir.
Thank you very much. So I thought we'd kind of start off the show we'll start off in the sea portion before we get back on, before we head on land. So Disney Cruise Line announced not too long ago that its seventh ship is going to be heading into the overseas waters, so to speak, to Southeast Asia, and it's going to bring the ship to Singapore, which based off of the photo that they had given in the article, I'm assuming that the seventh ship is the ship that was purchased, that was 75% completed. Correct. Which now, is that the seventh ship as part of when they first made the announcement at the expo, when they said they're going to be almost doubling the size, or is that going to be the eighth ship and they just swapped it?
Believe it's going to be the now eighth ship, but I think seventh ship to be to be added to the fleet, as it were.
Gotcha. So there's going to be eight. Yeah. So there's going to be eight ships altogether.
There's of the what is it? The Triton class.
The
ships,
Triton class. Yeah.
Not mistaken. So you have the Wish, right? Just debuted. The Treasure is coming. Then you have one last final Triton class ship. And then this ship. So
Gotcha. And pretty much that we have been speculating, because this was also in the seas in the Asia territory, that we were pretty much saying, the Asian market needs a ship, and what better way? It's already kind of over there, and it was pretty much a done deal. But I think it was a smart move to kind of spread the cruise line ships in different territories, different directions, and of course with Bob Iger at the helm, so to speak, no pun intended, he's going to get into those different international markets, if you will. What do you fellas think? Do you think this is a good idea? This is a bad idea? Where's your head at?
This is actually one of Chapek's, and I'm going to keep saying it because he deserves the credit for it. Bob Iger inherited it, but it's definitely a Bob Chapek move, and it was brilliant. Buying this ship for pennies on the dollar when it was like 75% done, kind of repurposing it as a massive Disney cruise liner was a really brilliant move. Utilizing it, like you said, George, in Asia is a fantastic move as well. Asia is a big market for Disney in many, many ways. And I think that this is going to be very, very successful. We'll see what kind of ship this is going to be. I mean, Dre and I have speculated on a recent video that this might be a more value-orientated ship based on where it's docked. We're not really sure if that's going to be the case or not, but that would be interesting. But overall, it's a great move. And like I said, one of Chapek's smarter decisions.
You have an emerging market in the form of Asia for the Walt Disney Company. This is a market that they have been investing in for quite some time. Some of their investments stateside in some locations have been questioned, of course, and that question might come up for review, let's say, in a not so distant future. So that'll be an interesting development to watch, of course. But this makes a lot of sense to dock this out in Singapore and have it make it that kind of protocol for in this instance. It's an emerging middle class out there in much of Asia right now, specifically in China, and you with an emerging middle class, you have disposable income, and so obviously Disney wants to go ahead and capitalize on that. It's interesting looking at the median income for Singapore. It's interesting. OG, we had first seen that or saw there was some data indicating that there was a variance, a big kind of delta between the U.S. median income and Singapore. But it's interesting. I was quickly informed, well, you might want to check your numbers there. And I did. And sure enough, the disparity between the two nations aren't all that great. I believe on the world stage, U.S. is ranked 9th, and Singapore is ranked 11th, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of median income. So they're actually pretty comparable. I thought that was quite interesting. However, if it is going to serve the kind of Asian market, I would still expect a more value-focused branding with this, especially when it comes to the competition and so forth. And that would also limit the amount of investment that they have to pour into this ship specifically. For example, right, like I think we heard some initial reports that they were going to reduce the amount of cabins, so they could combine some cabins in order to kind of provide the kind of accommodations that people kind of have expected from the Disney Cruise Line. Well, with a more value-oriented business model for this market, you don't necessarily have to do that, or at least to the degree that they were. So that could limit your investment and so forth. And to have a value product at sea in this region, I think it's a very, very smart bet. We'll have to see whether or not they actually go that route. But I like your wording on there on this, OG. Giving credit to Bob Chapek, I think this is one of the most savvy moves that he ever pulled off here. And I think the Walt Disney Company will be reaping the benefits for years to come. It's interesting. There are some people in Disney Cruise Line who weren't a fan of the idea. They weren't a fan of this actually being added to the fleet in this manner. But given its destination and so forth, Singapore, all that, Josh DeMaro looks like a happy camper there. So I think it'll all work out in the end.
Well, and it was just all the stars kind of aligned for this, because it was far enough in the construction that it saved Disney a lot of money, but it wasn't too far in the process where Disney can't go in there and kind of change it and make it give it its own Disney DNA. So it was just there. Everything kind of just worked out so perfect for them on this, and yeah, it's interesting. Now, do we have a name for this one? I don't believe we do yet, right?
Not
Right.
yet.
Right now
Okay.
is the Global Dream.
Right.
Yeah.
A name has not been revealed as of this moment.
Okay. Well, that'll be interesting.
It
That'll be
does
very
look like the
interesting.
design has changed a little bit. Some eagle eye viewers were pointing out that the promotional art for this ship, if you remember, we showed the promotional art for this ship when it was officially made known that the Walt Disney Company had purchased the ship and will be adding it to its fleet. And we said that there were going to be 6 funnels on top. Looks like there are only going to be 4 funnels on top now with this
Okay.
latest rendering. So there are changes afoot here. I think the preliminary announcement of this ship being added onto the fleet and what they want to do with it might have changed. This is why I'm kind of speculating that, given the market that it's in right now, they might change tact when it comes to changes to the amount of cabins and so forth. So we'll see on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember,
I
this
think-
was supposed to service the Asian market to begin with. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's where Disney kind of, ran with that notion, and especially since it was already kind of, as OG had pointed out, that it's already been pretty much built for the purpose of that notion, so they could just go in there, tweak it, Disneyfy it, so it could be Disney, but it can still work towards the Asian market.
Absolutely.
So yeah, definitely some good things to come. I can't wait to see how it turns out. Disney Cruise Line hasn't disappointed me yet, so I think they're just going to keep growing.
And this is supposed to make way, what is it, 2025? So not
2025,
that
yeah.
far
And that's
away
where
there.
I was getting kind of confused, because that's where they had mentioned that the third Triton class ship was also going to be 2025. So I wasn't sure if both of these are going to be kind of almost back to back, or if this was going to be the Triton class ship, but just put in Asia.
Three Triton class ships plus this one.
This one, that's cool.
Crazy.
That's really cool. Okay, so we're going to leave the seas and head back to land. But before we do, we're going to make a quick detour. Before we head to Disney, we're going to stop at Universal with the updates for Epic Universe. And there is some construction leadway heading for like the direction of into Epic Universe as part of the Universal Orlando Resort. And I think it's quite interesting. This is actually from Twitter. And it's a elevated traffic circle that will connect the new Kirkman Road to Universal Orlando, Epic Universe. And I think it's kind of interesting, but I know a lot of people were trying to kind of decipher this sort of like a diagram and didn't really know, how to really read this. But I mean, I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. I think, once people get the gist of, where they're going and how to go. I mean, I guarantee you this thing's going to be filled up during the opening of Epic Universe. This thing's going to be filled with cars beyond. And so, I mean, what do you guys feel? How do you guys feel about it?
Well, okay, I have a question. Maybe Dre, maybe you know this. From what I understand, Epic Universe is going to have a dedicated bus line just for them, correct? That goes back and forth. Is this little circular thing part of that? I see a couple buses in the artwork. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Is this,
I wonder if that center. So if you see that center lane,
Right.
usually we have ingress and egress traffic, right? It's kind of weird to have a lane dedicated unto itself. But if you can see, that's a good pointing out here, OG. Very close in their artwork. That center lane just has buses. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is the dedicated bus lane that will take guests from, let's say, Universal Orlando Resort Core to
Right.
Epic Universe.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And
Very.
I'm also interested too, kind of digressing a little bit from this to Epic Universe in general, but
Sure.
we've seen, look, that whole where they're building Epic Universe has a lot of land. I recently saw someone on Twitter made like a diagram of the
Let's see
whole
if I can
area.
pull that up, actually.
Yeah, go ahead and pull that up, because there's a lot of land there. You can fit like another park or even two, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So when we say core, the core Universal, I wonder if that's even going to change in the future. I wonder if this property right here, that big universe, will be the main resort at one point because there is so much expansion potential. I'm not
Correct.
familiar with how much land they have at the current resort.
That was the speculation for actually some time, that the amount of land that Universal actually has purchased in and around the kind of, I believe it was the Wet and Wild area,
Right.
can encompass far more than just this theme park. When people were actually looking at it from aerial shots and so forth, it's like, whoa, the theme park is only going to take up this much room. And sure enough, yeah, I mean, there are some long-term plans that involve utilizing this not just for expansions for Epic Universe, right, but for more parks and more resort hotels specifically. So I think there's a long-term plan out there suggesting that there might be as many as 4 theme parks on Universal Resort property, with 2 of them being here at the Epic Universe site, 2 of the existing portfolio, let's say, and then a range of hotel and resort accommodations built all around.
And then also Volcano Bay, their water park.
Yeah, and
Correct,
they maybe they'll add another water park. I don't know if that's a possibility, if that's on the table or not, but that would be interesting. One thing that I think Universal should really do, though, going forward, and this is just my opinion, but Disney, I think even though Disney is sort of, everything's IP with Disney, just like it is with Universal, and Disney is watering down the themes of each park with this influx of IP, and they definitely have. The uniqueness of each park has been sort of minimized based on just the overall IP going into all these places. But here's the thing with Universal, I still think they fall behind a little bit from Disney in that each park is very, that each park has its own personality, right? So with Epic Universe and Islands of Adventure, there's really not that much difference in terms of like what they're offering, in terms of like park identity. They're kind of the same park with just kind of different window dressing.
Different IPs. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes not even different IP. They have Potter in all these parks, right?
Yeah,
I think
pretty
Universal, if they're going to build another park on this property, I think it should be something that is distinctively different than what they already have, distinctively different from IOA, distinctively different from the studio and Epic Universe, something with its own identity. Because Disney right now, I know it's been watered down with the IP, but Epcot is a very different park than Magic Kingdom. Magic Kingdom is a very different park than Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. They still have an identity. They're still very different places. Universal, I feel like they are kind of a little too much the same, in my opinion. That's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, the industry model now is to not have necessarily a dedicated theme park, right? Where it's like you have an entire park and it's restricted to one theme, which is interesting because people criticize themed lands that they're only restricted to one theme, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting how the back and forths here. But they're the change is to have a park that can encompass multiple themes, and I think that trend started with, I want to say, Islands of Adventure back in 1999, and has continued there ever since then. So, and we're starting to see that with Disney parks, right, where it's like, oh yeah, Epcot, the vision of the future with a World's Fair. Well, it can incorporate some authentically Disney things or whatever, right?
Right.
We've seen this with Disney's Hollywood Studios, where it was like the studio park, and it still is, but it's not necessarily a showcase of the making of movies or to honor movies of the past, but to celebrate movies of the present, right? So that's kind of changed. Animal Kingdom has largely been consistent with its theme, but it's gone on to incorporate mythical storytelling. Like Avatar, for example, which was always part of its charter, but that expect an expansion in that role there. California Adventure, right? So we've seen this kind of expand out to various players in the industry, and I would expect that trend to continue. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like themed parks, but they are kind of limiting. And so, and yeah, I do kind of agree with you. The mix of IP for Universal has always been a constant issue between what they actually own in-house, what they actually license out, and so forth.
Right.
But I would also expect that trend to continue as well because Comcast's IPs, unfortunately, are limited. I know they bought DreamWorks some years ago, and they're going to be investing in that arena upcoming shortly. But these kind of tie-ins with these more established franchises is something that just Universal just doesn't have in its back pocket like you would a Disney or other players in this field. So this is Epic Universe as it's going to exist when the park finally opens and it's operating and so forth. Here's what it could be in the future. So there is enough room for 2 parks, as you can see right here, a City Walk location, obviously back of house, a multi-story parking garage, hotel. A lot of this would actually take the place of the actual parking lot that they're going to build initially. So that is a temporary parking lot from everybody I've heard from. The plan is to build another park on that someday, and then you can see the hotels and water park and all that kind of stuff that are kind of dotted throughout this whole thing. So there are ambitious plans for this property. I'm not saying that this is the final version. I'm just saying that this is kind of speculation. This is kind of a fan done blueprint model for this area, but you can see where the potential lies.
There's a huge amount of land here, so I would imagine
lot.
Universal is going to utilize it in some way, for expansions. A second park seems likely on this property. So,
And Universal was always playing second fiddle to Disney, and it just seems like recently Universal has come into their own and just kind of became their own top dog, so to speak, with all the IPs and the franchises that they have collected throughout many years. And the land that they have acquired is pretty much, a daunting task. But I can't really say that Universal is not up to par to do it, because so far it's been pretty impressive.
well, they're very ambitious, and not just with theme parks, but even with animation. And we're seeing in the theater right now, Super Mario Brothers, a movie that George absolutely loved. I think you gave it an A++, right, George?
Oh, absolutely.
No, but in all seriousness, Mario's crushing it right now at the box office, right? And so they're getting, and Puss in Boots did very well. So they're
Apparently
getting
Shrek 5 has been approved just based
Right.
on that one success there.
Right,
And then they're
exactly.
also going to have a spin-off with just Donkey, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken, like after Shrek 5.
Right, and if you don't think, I'm telling you right now, the original Shrek movies, they made fun of Disney all the time because it was Katzenberg's baby. He kind of had a little chip on his shoulder, right?
Correct.
If you don't think Comcast is going to use that property to do the same damn thing, I'm telling you, there's a lot of Disney jokes in there. I can guarantee it.
Absolutely. And you could expect more integration of the Shrek franchise in future projects going forward if they are very successful. It's interesting looking at this concept right here, and you see 2 parks added on. The mind kind of like goes, like this. And just a quick question I want to pose to you guys.
Sure.
With Epic Universe, I think we're all kind of feeling like, I think there will be attention brought with it, right? And
Absolutely.
it'll obviously get the attendance, at least initially. We'll have to see how that actually goes long term, what that cannibalization actually looks like, what the retail sales look like, and so forth, right? So it's still a lot of open questions, but we kind of have a basic idea of what could happen. But still, I mean, people are going to look at, Universal Studios and go, well, it's got 3 gates, but doesn't have 4, right? Just like people look at Disneyland and Walt Disney World and they go, Disneyland's got 2 gates, Walt Disney World has 4, right? Does a 4th gate place Universal on another level in regards to that conversation? And does Disney respond with a 5th gate based solely on that perception changing the public?
I think it does. I think there is a psychological element here. Now, sometimes the psychology of it isn't always true to reality, but it's there, right? And what I mean by that is like people think, you talk to a lot of normies, right? Why would I go to Disneyland Resort? There's more rides in Florida. Well, actually, there isn't. I mean, our parks have more rides per park. I mean, we have a lot here. Disneyland has that way more attractions than anything in Florida, right? I mean, it's a stacked park, but there's still that psychology, that psychological element of like, oh, well, that one's bigger, so it has so much more. So once Universal gets 4 parks and it's equal to the parks that Disney World has, regardless of how many acres Disney World has that Universal doesn't have, regardless of how many rides they might have compared to Universal, the normies are going to see it as 4 and 4.
Yeah,
they're
they
equal.
Distill it down to 4
Yep.
and 4.
Yep.
And then I also think it goes by how long it would take for Universal to make that official announcement that there's going to be another park after Epic Universe. So if they, depending on when they make that announcement, they could actually beat the public and say, "Hey, we got this on the horizon." So that way, people really aren't focused on asking the question because they already got the answer. Now with Walt Disney World, just Disney in general, I think, because a lot of people, ask, Disney or question Disney to say, are you nervous about Epic Universe? Are you nervous that Universal's expanding? And you pretty much get the same thing from Disney. No, we're not worried. Not a bit. It's fine. But I still think deep down, Disney has to have that way to the public, because what are they going to end up saying? Yeah, we're shaking in our boots right now. It's like it can go either way. I think Disney's more so just waiting it out to see how popular this is, and then that will determine whether, okay, do we make a move now? Do we make a move later? What kind of move do we end up doing? However, Iger kind of already mentioned that at part of the shareholders meeting with the $17 billion investment in Walt Disney World over the next 10 years, which we will get into in a little bit. But so he kind of already plays into that notion that, whether or not Epic Universe is an epic fail or an epic spectacular, that Disney already has something in their back pocket to kind of retaliate.
Well, yeah, and I think it's smart, and I think kind of a little bit on an island here with the overall fandom. The fandom thinks that Disney needs to do something now with Epic Universe. And I completely disagree. I think that what you do is, I think the smart move is you wait and see. You don't want to pour $1 billion+ into a response that doesn't really need to be there, right? Because we don't know what Epic Universe is going to do. Now, yes, with the tunnel vision, is the park itself going to do well? Is it going to get a lot of people opening year and all that? Yes, it will. But is it cannibalizing IOA? Is it cannibalizing the studio park? See, that is a huge factor in the success of Epic Universe, how it kind of coexists with these other Universal parks. If Epic Universe opens and it's packed every single day, right? It's hitting capacity every single day, but the other parks are struggling because of Epic Universe being so busy and it's cannibalizing the other parks. This isn't a success then. All they did was move people from this spot to this spot. That doesn't do anything for Universal. So it's also a merch game. How's the merch going to sell, right? Now look, Nintendo merch has proven very popular out here in California. I got some of mine right here. You can see it right there. My little mushrooms, right? Hey, I've been buying, and Dre can vouch. When we went to Universal Nintendo World, I was I bought quite a bit of merch, and I was buying stuff, and I bought more merch recently, and so they the Mario stuff has been very, very good. I think that's gonna do very well over at Epic Universe. Even some of the How to Train Your Dragon stuff, we're seeing some. Our good friend Theme Park Wizard actually sent me a picture of this toothless dragon popcorn bucket that they're now selling out here in Hollywood. Very adorable, kind of a Japanese inspired kind of design with the big eyes. It was really, really adorable. A little pricey, it's like $42, but it's good looking merch, right? So if Universal can tap into some of that with this new park, get those merch sales, and it doesn't cannibalize the other parks, then I think you have a massive hit on your hands.
And even if it does cannibalize the other parks in terms of attendance, if your retail sales and your per caps are higher than when you started without Epic Universe, that could be perceived as a win, at least by Comcast as well. I think to get Disney to respond, it's not just going to take attendance. And even if there is an attendance cannibalization, it's not necessarily going to move the needle for Disney. It's going to be where are the dollars spent? Because so many people are going to have money when they go on vacation. Where are they spending the bulk of it? Is it going to be at Universal or is it going to be at Disney? And if it is at Universal, then that's something that I think they need to respond to. I do agree with you, OG. Wait and see approach is good. The only issue potentially is the amount of time it takes for Disney to respond.
Right.
You don't want to have Epic Universe reaping the benefits for 4 or 5 years before you could actually open something in competition with it. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see. If they have to respond at all, in what way and when.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. We're seeing right now Disney doesn't really value bodies in the park. We're seeing that with the reservation system. We're seeing that with the spending per person, spending per guest. Yes, that's more important to Disney. Right, the whole reservation system exists because of that mindset. So you're absolutely right, Dre. It's going to come down to that. What are people's spending habits at this park? Right.
Correct.
And speaking of spending habits, we're going to end up leaving Universal here and going over to Walt Disney World for something that a lot of guests have been spending a lot of, because for 2 days in a row, Genie Plus has been completely sold out. And I believe it was April 4th and April 5th during the grand opening of Tron Light Cycle that Genie Plus had been at its highest. Oh, and now it's for the third day in a row, excuse me. That it was at its highest purchase ever at $35 per guest. And that is... that's just mind-blowing to me, to the fact that but yet I think we had talked about this before the show. I think like the higher it is, you had mentioned it, OG, that it's more of a way for guests to say, you know what, yeah, let's kind of grab it, because at this price,
it must be good.
Everybody gonna grab us? But apparently everyone had that same mindset, because Disney got a little cash grab at this.
Well, it's like if you order a steak at a restaurant, the steak is like $150, right? You're gonna assume that steak is gonna be really good. It's so expensive; it has to be good. So when they start raising the price on this stuff, I think there is a psychological element to it. Like, oh man, it must be really great if it's so much, and so it's interesting.
I think people make the argument in their heads, like if the Disney themselves are valuing this as high as they are on this day, then it must be in demand on that day, so it must be a really good value on that day, right? So it's this kind of almost social engineering that's going on there with price valuation structure and all that. And look, this is all a part of that per cap thing that we were talking about in the previous conversation. Nice little transition there, George. Per caps. Doesn't matter how many people that you necessarily have in your park. It's how much each person is spending. And how do we actually delineate between those? That's why there are restrictions for APs, for example, and an enhanced emphasis placed on ticket holders, both at Walt Disney World and at Disneyland, especially, actually. It's all about how what people actually go in there and how much they're actually spending. And that's why when it comes to the earnings reports, that per cap number is so crucial. It's so important. For DTC, you have the average revenue per user, or ARPU. That's a very important metric. Look at that. Don't look at subscriber numbers. Don't look at attendance numbers. Look at how much money they're actually making. That's going to be very significant. Now, it could be where it's like, you could be like Six Flags, where you have almost nobody in there, but your per caps are up. But it's like, yeah, but that doesn't offset the what is it? The discrepancy between how many people were in your park before and how many people are now. I think they're double-digit percentage reductions in how many people are actually going to their parks, for example. That doesn't offset your per cap increase, right? So obviously there's some interplay there. But $35 per day for this actual product, it's a lot. I would hope that the actual buy-in percentages have been capped or reduced from the 50% buy-ins that they were experiencing before when this product actually debuted. We'll see, though. I'm not so. I'm We'll see. I'm not so optimistic about that, though. But the interesting thing about this as well, though, George, this didn't just come with a increase for the Genie Plus product, but for virtual queues, as grabbed for Tron Light Cycle Run specifically, they now have added or I should say, they're now enforcing the return windows in a manner that they hadn't previously. So prior to this change, just for an example, if you were to get a virtual queue at the start of the day, and I believe, does this cover purchased boarding groups as well, George? This change?
Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
So
You
anytime
purchase it or get it.
correct. And then whenever it is your time to return, you have to be there. Otherwise, I guess it's so high in demand that if anybody is late or if anybody, it's going to knock their algorithm off completely.
Right, and this is a big change because previously people would kind of get it, not and look, when you got your virtual queue, you never necessarily knew when this was actually going to come up. It was, first of all, it's a roll of the dice on which actual boarding group number you actually get to begin with. And then beyond that, now it's down to the operational cycle of the attraction itself, right? How much uptime there is going to either push you forward or bring you back into where the estimated return time that they give you is going to be. So because of that, there was a certain flexibility offered to guests because they could be dining in some place on property, or they could be in another park entirely, or any number of things could happen where you want to accommodate that person, right? Look, they either paid for a boarding group or they got a virtual queue ticket, right?
Right.
And that's kind of hard to do, as George and I know very intimately. Hey, they went through the process, they got one, let's just have them come in. Unfortunately, now they're no longer doing that, and it's interesting because I believe Tom Corliss from Walt Disney World News Today actually had some information on this. Well, it's kind of a rant, but I think it's appropriate for this conversation, so I figure why not include it. So here's some words from Tom Corliss.
But I'm sorry. If you're making people wake up at 7 a.m. as it is, you're already inconveniencing people. If you're then really going to hold them to this 1 hour slot and then also misquote them, right? So I got a boarding group on yesterday, Tuesday, and it was essentially quoted me as at 11 a.m. They're like around 11 a.m. I was called at 8:59 a.m. I was not at Magic Kingdom yet because you told me it was going to be at 11, right? And so my window was going to expire at 9:59, which was an hour and 61 minutes ahead of when you told me you thought it was going to be. I get it's estimated, but at the same time, they either need to do a better job estimating or give people a longer window. Maybe the window shouldn't be an hour.
Yeah, the window's an hour, by the way. That's the big kind of distinction here.
Maybe the window should
Sorry. Yeah.
be, I don't know. Maybe it should be 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. I don't think it needs to be all day. Come back whenever you want. But I think the window, if it's going to be like this, needs to at least be bigger than it is, right? And this is essentially why with Guardians and Rise and those, they never really enforced those return times because it was kind of hard to. People were like, I had dining reservations, the bus was late, this happened, that happened. And honestly, people operating the front of the attraction don't need to deal with outside factors, right? Like that's not a thing that needs a concern. They need to be either know if a person should be let in or should not. And if they had a boarding group, the consensus was you should let them in. They fought to get a boarding group this moment. Let them in the ride. And I don't think that should change. If you really don't want to allow that with Tron because you're afraid everyone will show up the moment it gets dark out because everyone wants to ride it at night, then you need to find another solution. I know this is a soft opening period, so you can claim like, oh, it's not officially open yet. We could do what we want. But, you still don't want to make guests upset, right? So I hope by April 4th they have some better system in place than they currently do. That or maybe change. This is going to be super controversial. But do what you did for Rise in the beginning where you had to be in the park for that first drop. Like if it's going to require, if you think people are going to be on that quick, then don't make them sign up from home and then they have to take the chance of, am I going to make it or am I not? And then you're going to send trains with empty seats at that point, right? Which is not ideal. It's not ideal. So they've got a couple days to figure this out, and hopefully they will.
Okay.
Interesting.
I agree with Tom. I think honestly, for something of a high popular demand as Tron is becoming, that Disney had to rely on their sources to say, okay, you have to be there right as you're being called. Then I would have the first drop be that you're in the park, because that way you have nothing as an obstacle to get you into that park if you happen to be called during that time. I do agree with that. My second thing is, if they want to try to find a way to kind of configure guest schedules out, that's what Genie Plus should do. Of how they kind of read us, our day-to-day activities of what we have going on. With Walt Disney World, or any Disney vacation for that matter, you have to plan out months, even to a year ahead of time. 60 days out, you start booking your dining reservations. So when your dining reservation is linked to your My Disney Experience account, whenever you get that virtual queue, it should tie into wherever your dining reservation is, then swap it after the fact your dining is done or beforehand.
It's a good idea. I mean, that's a no-brainer. No-brainer, George. It's a great idea. That it take those things into account when you actually provide a random time to actually come back to that attraction. I like it. And then if those actually end up conflicting, obviously in that instance, now we have a kind of digital paper trail that we can access by cast members and say, oh yeah, you had a dining reservation when you were called back. Don't worry about it. We got you.
Makes
sense.
sense.
That kind of thing. Perfect sense, George. I mean, it's this is Disney IT, folks. Disney IT. They should have already done this to begin with.
Well, I think it was the what was it? The Space Mountain single rider line. I think they took your advice on that one, Dre. So maybe they'll take George's advice on this one. And we know they watched, right? I mean,
let's do it.
Like,
come on, Disney. Come on.
Let's do it. Let's go. Well,
there you go. Yes. Absolutely.
For sure. Enhanced demand though for Genie Plus especially. I mean, this is a very busy week, with a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, Tron is opening. Happily Ever After is now playing. You have Easter and so forth. Spring. Yeah. Yep. it's packed, so that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bravo to Disney, getting more of the crowds back and everything, and utilizing. Hopefully, they can work out the kinks. So again, Disney, we know you're watching. Bubby, come on, let's do this. Let's talk.
Come on. I love it. I love it.
Okay, so now moving on, news that we were all waiting to hear of speculation that Walt Disney World is finally resuming their annual pass holder sales starting April 20th. All passes will be available for grabs. The Incredipass, the Sorcerer Pass, the Pirate Pass, and the Pixie Dust Pass, ranging from the low end of $3.99 to the Incredipass at $13.99 a year. So, I mean, I know I had given up my annual pass. I might in the future maybe look into it again. As of right now, no need for it. But I am glad to see that whoever wants to have an annual pass again and wants to be a dedicated fan, it's good to see that Disney now is on the fast track of getting more annual pass holders to the parks. And more so, basically now all that's left, Iger, is Magical Express.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I think this is it could be a two-pronged thing going on here. We have a new sheriff in town, Bob Iger, right? And I think that with him, I think there has been a push since he came back to kind of win fans back over, right? So this might be some of this might be part of that. Also, we've also heard from Christine Wastelands McCarthy that they want to be able to pull some levers. If some of these annual pass numbers start to fall off, they can pull that lever, bring some back in, then they can cut it off again. Now we see, I think it's in here, it says that they can shut this off at any time.
Yep.
So,
and they will.
They'll fill it up, and then they'll shut it off again. So You know, it's a supply and demand thing. I mean, it's a demand thing, and also I think trying to kind of win some kudos from fans a little bit. They're trying to win back some goodwill.
And it also goes back to where is the spending at? And a lot of times, if you're a local and you're an annual pass holder, you go to the parks, you may walk around, but is that where the capital is coming from? So it's like Disney can make the money by selling the passes themselves, but then, yeah, as you fellas have mentioned, using those levers, shut it off when we need to, and it's like, then we're good to go.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll be as aggressive with shutting those levers on and off as they have been in Disneyland, for example, because the pass holder populations are different. It does say to me, though, I mean, this is after they instituted the change to the pass holder program, in which now you don't have to make a reservation, other than a couple of parks on the weekends and so forth, right, after 1 p.m. So with that change, obviously the valuation for the passes are now very, very different than what they where they were. To me, this has a couple of things, but I do agree with you. Supply and demand levers. There are, let's say, some economic headwinds on the horizon, specifically. From what I'm hearing, Q3, Q4, that type of area might look very differently than how we sit today. So Disney obviously he understands that, right? There might be demand waning, let's say, for these parks because of those economic factors. Get people in now, ensure that you will have at least people in the park who have the ability to spend later.
For a whole year.
Smart move. Yeah,
whole year.
Yep.
Whole year.
Smart move.
Yep, absolutely. So it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. We'll
but
see.
It's nice to see. It's nice to see like an upswing. As I said, even
Some
like the
positive
small
stuff.
things that counts. It's like,
Goodwill.
yeah, and again, if we're already seeing that with the annual pass holders, they just need to do something. For me, anyways, and I think a lot of fans would agree, is the Magical Express issue of getting to and from the Orlando International Airport to the resort and back again.
And speaking of like goodwill and all that, I think the reservation system after 2 p.m. is coming up soon, right? That whole thing where if you're a pass holder, you don't need a reservation after 2 p.m. I believe
1
that
p.m. or
kicks
2
in.
p.m.?
It's 1 or 2, I forget.
I think it was 2. Don't quote me.
Yeah, I thought it was 2, but maybe 1. But I think that's also coming up, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's also coming up. And like I said, I mean, that changes the valuation of these parks, which is why I think they increased the price a little bit here.
Yeah.
Not by much, though. And Universal also increased their passes as well for their product. I can't remember on which coast, but it was incremental as well. It wasn't that big. So, are we coming up to a ceiling here? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard Iger talk about that before, so that's interesting as well.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. And Universal has been sort of like the value resort for a while. People go there because it's more affordable. I'm telling you right now, and this is basic economics, the more market share Universal gains, the more those prices are going to go up.
Yes.
It's cheap right now because they're trying to gain market share, but once they're established and they're more of a mature market, they're going to make money on higher prices. And you're already seeing that kind of slip in a little bit with like the price of some of these popcorn buckets over there. Like I just mentioned, the How to Train Your Dragon bucket over here at Universal Hollywood was like $42.
And when Epic Universe opens, that's gonna really raise hotel pricing. It's because they're gonna know, they're anticipating that there's gonna be people that are gonna fly to Florida or drive or what have you and stay on property to be able to enjoy Epic Universe. So what better way to do it? Hey, let's jack up the prices of the hotels and then give them a small little hotel discount. So it's basically, we're raising it up high to kind of bring it down to its mediocre state.
Right. Well, that's a classic sales tactic. A lot of retail does that. They jack up their prices and they give you 25% off, and the 25% off basically puts you to normal.
Yeah.
Starting April 18th, Walt Disney World annual pass holders will be able to visit the theme parks after 2 p.m. most days without a park pass reservation. This does not include Magic Kingdom on Saturdays and Sundays, when a reservation will still be required. So that's the detail there that we're looking for.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, expect Universal to get to maximize ROI potential as much as possible, right? So as they grow larger, it's going to be interesting to see how they compete in pricing and how they mirror each other in pricing. I think on the ticket and entry and so forth, they've been mirroring that for a little while. Merch, like you said, OG, but hotels, that's a very interesting one. We've seen them be the kind of the value player in this game for a while. Does that change as the dynamic changes, the center of gravity shifts? We'll see.
We'll see.
We will definitely see. Well, folks, we thank you for joining us for the lighter part of the show. So now we're gonna dig a little deeper here with some pretty juicy topics, and we're gonna start off with the comment from Bob Iger. I think I hear something in the background.
I think I hear a train. Is that a train, George?
That is.
Oh no! I must have hit that track switch!
There we go.
Here we go.
I think, actually, you know what? Oh, man, Goofy fell off. That sucks.
And that's a perfect segue because we really did hit the track switch. We're now going into some a darker territory here. So, but coming from Mr. Bob Iger himself during the shareholders meeting, he had briefly mentioned when talking about the state of Walt Disney World and where it is leading into with the Florida politics and everything, which we will get into that in a little bit, that he had briefly mentioned that they will be investing in $17 billion to the Walt Disney World Resort over the next 10 years. And just that comment alone, it blew up on social media. Everyone on Twitter was saying, all speculations of what this could mean, what this could be. And I think, and you fellas had touched upon on it during a previous recording when the news dropped on the shareholders meeting. But I thought we'd kind of dig a little deeper into it and what this could potentially mean for the resort, any speculations, and actually our numbers guy, Mr. Vash Sky, to possibly maybe break down a little bit of the 17 billion of how much can go into the speculation of a possible fifth gate or new lands and what have you. So so I'll actually pass it down to you, Mr. Vash Sky.
We will go over Bob Iger's comments in a moment. We'll actually play them for you, so you know that we're not just pulling this out of thin air. This is actually coming from legit sources here. But that also goes to the next part of this whole
the darker side of this.
The dark side, let's say. So we'll start with the light side right now. $17 billion for Walt Disney World over the next 10 years. That is a tremendous amount of investment. He also says that they'll be bringing 13,000 new jobs. Now, to me, 13,000 doesn't necessarily indicate a new park. However, well, this is interesting because 17 billion, I mean, what? Shanghai was built for anywhere between 6 to 8. Over there, and that was relatively recently, 2016. Obviously, things have gotten a little bit more expensive since that time period. So, a new gate for Disney, could we speculate maybe $10 billion? That still leaves $7 billion to be distributed amongst Walt Disney World's existing property for that period of time. It is an interesting proposal, not a huge sum of money when you consider that it's twice the size of Manhattan, but could you see a fifth gate added in there? I think yes. 13,000 though says to me expansions, but maybe I'm wrong. OG, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning more towards. I think they'll do the fifth gate if they have to. If that Epic Universe thing is really cutting into their money, then maybe they'll do okay, you know what, we got to direct these funds over to a new gate.
Correct.
Maybe that's an option. I think really though the 17 billion is going to be more about expansions and kind of touching upon the weaker parts of the current parks, right? And historically, Disney has they'll do a park or two. one year, and then they'll wait a year, then maybe do another park, and then wait a year and do another park or two. So it's pretty sporadic, right? And so if they continue that trend, I think 17 billion can go a long way. I mean, if you're gonna look a Villain's Land, how much is a Villain's Land really gonna cost for Disney? Okay, it's not even gonna put a dent in the 17 billion.
Okay.
You know.
Now, I wanted to ask you fellas that, because if they wanted to kind of go that route, which I do agree with you, OG, they really need to focus on the parks that they already have. They have to, before even considering a fifth gate, they have to work on the parks they already have.
Correct.
But do you also think, because when they talk to Imagineer Chris Beatty, with that the magazine company, and he said, we took note of this, of the crowd's reaction to the villains and what have you. Could they necessarily put the villains a little bit even further on the back burner and maybe possibly withhold that for the fifth gate itself rather than just one land? So then you would have Dark Kingdom, but it wouldn't be Dark Kingdom as a land, it would be Dark Kingdom as the fifth gate.
That would be a big game changer for Walt Disney World if they did that, because I think a concept like that, if executed really well, would be a huge draw for Walt Disney World. But the problem, though, is right now you have the 4 parks; they need a lot of work. So you're taking money away from the existing stuff and putting it into a new thing now. It's
okay. Now that's actually, because that was also part of my question to you, Dre, for like Toy Story Land, Galaxy's Edge, Pandora, how much initially did those lands cost? Do you happen to know?
Galaxy's Edge, each land consisted of about $1 billion worth of investment. I believe Avatar was north of $600-700 million. And then Toy Story Land, obviously, there wasn't that much investment there. So we're talking max maybe $150 million in itself, right? So when you look at 17 billion, that's quite a bit. Fifth Gate, obviously, like we went over before, that's about $10 billion. And
so that's what I'm saying. Do you fellas think they would hold the villains off a little bit longer to then do it, or do you think they would just push it just to kind of get it into the park?
I think they want it in Magic Kingdom. I think they want it sooner. It got a good reaction, and to a park is going to take a long time with Disney.
It's just Well,
look how long it took Tron.
Right. Yeah. In Walt Disney World, they take forever for everything. It's not as bad out here for some reason. I don't know why, but in Florida, it takes forever.
But I do agree with you, fellas. They have to work on the 4 parks. They need to, because even Iger had mentioned it, they need to expand the parks to keep that guest flowing, throughout the day.
Well, precisely. And then you have to create maybe new draws too, for like Animal Kingdom, for example. Right. It's always been something that's like, it just isn't the draw there. They can't even, keep the hours for that park to a point that mirrors the other parks in there. That's a big issue. Go ahead, OG.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the priority one is handle the parks you got right now. Yeah. Because really, look, and I've said this so many times, but there's only so much time people can go on vacation. There's only so many days people can take off of work, or there's only so much money people have. So I think you need to focus on the 4 that we got now. If you add a 5th one, you're starting to get into territory like what potentially Universal can be going through with cannibalization, right? So I think you're better off just having the 4, work on those, get each park really running on all cylinders. And then if you need a 5th park, and there's the demand for it, and the other parks are looking pretty good, then I think you can kind of maybe toy with that idea. I just think it's very much unnecessary right now to have that 5th gate. I think they really look, Hollywood Studios. Oh my, there's so much there they need to fix before they even consider a 5th gate. And like Dre said, Animal Kingdom. It's not that park is a mess. It's just it's lacking a lot. There's not much to do, right? So address these problems first, and then and with Disney, there's so much demand there. Like even if Universal has Epic Universe coming, Disney doesn't necessarily need a 5th gate to compete with that. A Villain's Land would do probably just as much for Disney, because there's so much demand there. with the Villains Land, and Disney's already high in demand as it is. They could respond with the Villains Land, and I think that would be a comparable thing for them.
And Magic Kingdom is still top dog as far as
Absolutely.
the
It's
the
the
number
most
of
attended theme park
visitors.
in the world outside of Tokyo.
Yeah. So
Right.
if you add in villains to that park alone, that's
Telling you.
gonna.
It would pull people
They-
away from Universal. That's a big draw.
They want to increase the capacity of Magic Kingdom, like a lot. Like and that's why we heard the Blue Sky ideas relating to Magic Kingdom specifically in Animal Kingdom, right? Like they were commissioned as Blue Sky's concepts because they understand where the bulk of the money should be spent. As of right now, Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom. Animal Kingdom, there we've gone over it before, but there are issues there concerning demand, concerning the amount of guests you can actually hold in that park, the amount of things that guests can actually do in that park, the hours and so forth. All of those should be addressed, and it's going to take a considerable amount of investment for Magic Kingdom. Obviously, they want to grow the park and allow more people in. They also want to address the kind of the dead end, let's say, that Disneyland had for many, many years relating to Critter Country and Frontierland, right? And how, you had to double back and so forth. One of the things that would really assist for Magic Kingdom specifically is to complete that circuit around Rivers of America. They want to duplicate that success that we've seen in Disneyland with a concept out there. This goes into, obviously the Coco and Encanto concepts, but also the Villains Land. See, Villains Land, it's interesting. I think that like they obviously D23 respondents made an impression there with their enthusiasm of that project. I think that's going to be a stalwart of that whole expansion pad idea. Dark Kingdom, we have heard for many, many years about the concept of a Dark Kingdom being added as the fifth gate, right? And this park was going to work very differently than the other parks that are currently on Walt Disney World property. For example, right, it was going to be a night park where it was going to have hours that were going to, not be kind of the traditional morning and evening hours that we see with the existing parks, but it was going to be like operations from like 1 or 3 to like maybe 1 or 3 a.m. kind of thing, right? It was going to be
That's a great concept, by the way.
Correct. And what that would have allowed them to do was you could have conferences in the morning and in the afternoon for big corporate events and so forth, and then the actual guests could take part in all the festivities at night. So it's a very interesting concept right there, and you could get around, let's say, the cannibalization problems of adding just a fifth gate on its own. Right now, the kind of traditional parks close a little bit earlier. This park's open later, so everybody, kind of extends their day with that park. It's a very interesting concept right there. I just don't think the villains alone are going to be featured there. I think they want a more broader concept.
Yeah, and I think they want something in there a little more expeditiously. It's going to take them a while to do it, but I think they're looking a little more short term than another park would be right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be part of Magic Kingdom.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I honestly, and after the drop that Dwayne The Rock Johnson made for the live action Moana, which he pretty much wants the original cast of the animated film to return for the live action, and then on top of the Moana miniseries coming to Disney Plus, I think it's pretty much, and then the Moana meet and greet at Animal Kingdom. I think it's pretty much safe to say that the concept art for Animal Kingdom back for Dinoland USA is probably also going to be, that's probably going to be announced first. Dre, I know you and I talked about this on the phone quite some time, that Animal Kingdom was the next one to get that investment. So I think that's going to get announced before anything else. And I think it's going to be Moana and Zootopia.
I think so. I think you're right about that. Animal Kingdom is definitely a park that is in need of some investment. It's gone quite a while without substantial investment. I mean, what Avatar 2017?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're it's quite a ways
Been a while.
ago. You know, time flies fast when you're having fun, right? When you talk about $17 billion over the next 10 years, I think I did some math. And if you spread that out equally amongst the parks over that time period, I think it's about $425 million per park. This obviously includes some infrastructural costs that will obviously go along with that, or the 20-plus resort hotels that are actually on property. Disney Springs, for example, all of those are obviously going to take investment, right? You know, there's going to be some resort rehabilitations, for example, and you know, all these other things that the company has going on at Walt Disney World specifically. But you know, if they really kind of dedicate their focus on, you know, a park for a couple of years, and then the next park a couple more years, that kind of thing, you can really kind of spread this out in a really interesting way. But Bob Iger didn't make these comments in isolation, now did he?
No, he did not.
Go ahead and segue us to
do you
our next-
do you want to elaborate, if you will, Mr. Vaskai?
Oh, I will, because this was added as kind of a throwaway line in response to a question regarding Disney's ongoing dispute with the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, regarding the Reedy Creek Improvement District, or it's now named the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. So let's go ahead and examine those comments, because we have an update on this story as of today. So here we go.
Yes, sir. And our next question today comes from Alan Fisher from Ameriprise Financial. Please go ahead.
Hi, Bob. And again, I reiterate, welcome back. As a financial advisor here in Melbourne, Florida, only about an hour from Walt Disney World, what steps have already been taken or will be taken to protect shareholder value with regard to the legal battle between Disney and Ron DeSantis and the Reedy Creek Improvement District? We're kind of all concerned about that here for tax purposes. My son lives in Orlando, and he's worried about his taxes going up.
Alan, let me, if you don't mind, let me address this issue, which I haven't really done much publicly, but I'd love the opportunity just to put it all in perspective. First of all, I know you said you're a resident, I think, of Melbourne, Florida. We love the state of Florida, and I think that's reflected in not only how much we've invested over the last 50 years, but how much we've given back in the form of jobs and community service, taxes, which you brought up, tourism, of course, and all sorts of other responsible business practices. We've also always respected and appreciated what the state has done for us. It's kind of been a two-way street. But a year ago, the company took a position on pending Florida legislation. And while the company may have not handled the position that it took very well, a company has a right to freedom of speech just like individuals do. And obviously, in taking the position, the governor got very angry about the position Disney took, and it seems like he's decided to retaliate against us, including the naming of a new board to oversee the property and the business, in effect to seek to punish a company for its exercise of a constitutional right. And that just seems really wrong to me, against any company or individual, but particularly against a company that means so much to the state that you live in. And to put that in perspective, we have over 75,000 employees, which I noted in my opening. Countless thousands of indirect jobs have been created. About 50 million visitors will go through our gates this year alone, about 8 million of them from outside the U.S., and we are the largest taxpayer in the state. And you may find this interesting as it relates to future taxes, but we're currently planning now to invest over $17 billion in Walt Disney World over the next 10 years. And those investments, we estimate, will create 13,000 new Disney jobs and thousands of other indirect jobs. And they'll also attract more people to the state and generate more taxes. And so our point on this is that any action that thwarts those efforts, simply to retaliate for a position the company took, sounds not just anti-business, but it sounds anti-Florida. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much for your interest.
Leave it at that.
I'm glad he shorthanded it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. So, well, now we have some news today, though. Based, okay, so that was the annual shareholder meeting. Now DeSantis is firing back today. I'm gonna go ahead and I think you have some audio or video for us, Dre.
I got some video for us. So this comes in three separate video clips, so we can allow DeSantis to elaborate on his position, how he feels about it, and so forth. It's important to track these things and kind of get it from his mouth, let's say,
right?
Because it will definitely impact. So here we go. First clip here. There was a I believe 2 press conferences that were held, or 2, I would say, media appearances. One here was talking about the new Buc-ee's location going near, I believe, I-75, if I'm not mistaken. But I believe he was asked about it, and he has some comments about it. Here we go.
So this is the issue at Disney. They had self-government in this state for almost 60 years. We put a stop to that. We ended their self-governing status. And as that transition from a corporation running its own government to a state control board taking that and actually governing that based on the will of the people, they tried to do things that, quite frankly, were underhanded, doing like some development agreement at the last minute that was supposedly going to bind the district. First of all, this is self-dealing. They're negotiating with themselves. You can't do that. So there's a provision of Florida law where the legislature can void that. I think that the state board's going to void it too. So on both ends, I think that'll be taken care of. But what the speaker said and what I've said is now that this has been reopened, all options are on the table. We need to make sure that people understand, whether you're an individual or you're a corporation, that you don't get to play by your own rules. That the people of the state of Florida ultimately are the sovereign. They elect people to fill these offices and enact policy. And I think Disney has always viewed itself as being exempt from that constitutional process. Well, those days are over here in the state of Florida.
Can I just say something real quick? All the people applauding in the audience, 9 out of 10, I guarantee you, they're all annual pass holders.
Well, here's the thing too. It's easy to, and we've seen this in California. Disney's been demonized in the city of Anaheim. Oh, the big bad mouse, right? But boy, when the lockdowns came and you didn't have Disney to feed every business in the area, it sure was different, wasn't it? It changed the whole mindset. Believe me, if they could, and Disney were to lift all their properties off of Florida and move it, I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying hypothetically, these people wouldn't be cheering because it would greatly impact them. And here's the thing. Well, are we going to play the second clip before we kind of get into this? Because I think the other one. Okay, let's play the second one, then we'll dive into it.
Yeah. I think we got two more. Real quickly though, it should be a combined 3 minutes.
So I think there'll be a discussion on a wide range of opportunities to be able to make sure that this state control board is able to do the things that I've always said: live under the same laws as everybody else, pay fair share of taxes, pay off all the municipal debt, and live under the same law. Now that we've gotten rid of self-government, you actually now have state agencies going in and doing inspections like they would do on any other business. So they're now subjected to all this that they necessarily weren't. And the board, they got in probably about 6 weeks ago, maybe a little longer. They had to hire people. So there's been a little bit of a process. But I think what you're going to see is in the ensuing weeks, you're going to see a lot of very, very strong action that's going to basically validate what we said. But there will be additional legislative action taken in Tallahassee that will nullify what they tried to do at the 11th hour, and then potentially, arm the board with the ability, to make sure that this is run appropriately.
Well, let's see if he can follow through with that. He's making a promise right there. You heard it here, folks. He's going to nullify whatever Disney did. Let's see if that actually happens, because I have my doubts. And
we'll go into the legal arguments against.
And how he actually says, to inspect and everything. The way he's saying he's treating Disney like it's Section 8 housing, like they didn't have any way to, take care of their own property.
I mean, yeah, I know. It's just all rhetoric. He was humiliated by this move that Disney made. It was out in the open. His team, his board, and him dropped the ball. They didn't pay attention. They were so worried about the politics, they didn't dot their I and cross their T, and that's on him. Now he's got to clean the mess up, and he doesn't know what to do. But we'll get into that with this, because this is absolutely scrambling to somehow save face, in my opinion.
And you can tell that it's going to be it either is scrambling or a kind of multi-focused approach, right? He outlined some of the stuff that I think his office can do, and maybe some things that the legislature are going to do. So here we go. This is the one that makes all the headlines.
They've lost their own government. We've put the state in charge.
So
with
I
a
think there'll be a
control board. Now it's
discussion
interesting
on a wide.
Hang on. I think the other one's playing. Give me a second. Sorry, guys.
And they didn't lose their own thing because he just said right now they got it all back, and now they got to fight it in court again. So
government, we've put the state in charge with a control board. Now it's interesting. The media, tried to get spun up about Disney trying to do these agreements, very quietly right before we took control, and they're acting like somehow that they pulled one over on the state. There'll be a lot of that comes out over the next month or two, but suffice it to say, the legislature is going to avoid anything Disney did on the way out the door. But now that Disney has reopened this issue, we're not just going to avoid the development agreement they tried to do. We're going to look at things like taxes on the hotels. We're going to look at things like tolls on the roads. We're going to look at things like developing some of the property that the district owns. And so at the end of the day, I think what Disney has tried to do is they've tried to say that they should be able to operate outside the context of our constitutional system in Florida. No, we took this action prior to the election. We won overwhelmingly. They are not superior to the people of Florida. And so come hell or high water, we're going to make sure that policy of Florida carries the day. And so they can keep trying to do things, but ultimately we're going to win on every single issue involving Disney. I can tell you that.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the issue with this. Number one, he's trying to make it sound like he's doing this for the people. Well, all the stuff he outlined here, the hotel tax, the toll roads.
Yeah, who does that go to? That goes to the people to pay that.
Right. He's sticking it to the average person trying to take their family on vacation, right? So, okay, and that's number one. Number two, this whole thing that he's going through right now is that a California company was coming here and trying to tell Florida what to do. His retaliation against Disney has turned Central Florida, or will turn Central Florida, more California than it was before, with all the higher taxes and all the regulatory bullshit he's trying to put in here. He's making it more California because he's so spiteful against Disney and vindictive. Does he not see that? He's becoming the thing that he was railing against before in almost every way.
He's basically like a political Darth Vader, so to speak.
You either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. All right. That's some of what you're saying, I think, OG. Here's the thing. Okay. The talk about the developments at Walt Disney World and affecting those. It's an interesting idea. I suppose the board does have that power. We'll see what actually manifests from that, assuming the board can actually wrangle control back. Some people are pretty bullish in that they can. Some people are pretty bullish in that they can't. We'll go over some of the arguments here. But the two things I think that are kind of like, ooh, raise eyebrows here. Obviously, it's the taxes on hotels and the tolls on roads, right? The taxes on hotels, I was telling OG earlier today, that's been coming down the pike for a long, long, long time. That's the whole battle that has been fought vigorously in the halls of Tallahassee with Disney and Universal lobbyists specifically and so forth, right? So I wanted to read you this article here, or a little bit of it, to kind of go into this kind of story and why this is going to be something here that I think there's going to be enhanced emphasis placed on. So this is the Orlando Sentinel. Orlando hotel taxes don't pay for roads or housing like other cities. One reason: Disney and Universal's political power. So this is actually going back to 2019. This is long before the RSID was even brought up into question. So here we go. This is by Shabeli Carazana. Here we go. From the Florida Keys to Portland, Oregon, cities are increasingly turning to tourist taxes as one way to solve problems that come with being a top travel destination. In the Keys, a portion of the taxes paid by hotel guests have built more than 1,000 affordable housing units. Portland is tapping into similar funds to help with homelessness, and Las Vegas uses part of the money for schools and transportation. And Honolulu is building a 20-mile rail system with some of the funds from its taxes. But in Orlando, home to the most iconic theme parks in the world and more than 129,000 hotel rooms, elevated officials and industry leaders have preserved nearly all of the $300 million from a 6% levy on hotel rooms to aid the industry. When Florida lawmakers have attempted to loosen the restrictions on the tax, they've run into major roadblocks. Former State Representative Matt Gaetz tried in 2015 asking the state to let counties use hotel tax dollars to pay for lifeguards, police officers, and ambulances. Public services stressed in his home district by big crowds that flock to the beaches. But Gaetz, now a U.S. representative, said that he was forced to rewrite his bill so it only applied to Okaloosa, Walton, and Bay counties in Florida's Panhandle. Quote, "There is a saying in Tallahassee that your bill is dead if it has a rodent problem," said Gaetz, referring to the Walt Disney Company's vast influence in Florida politics. "In the end, I punted for a very parochial outcome, so I got mine." This is an interesting kind of debate here because with taxes, they are the state and the counties are very limited what they can actually use those taxes for right now. So the bulk of that $300 million has to be reinvested back into tourism and tourism exclusively. That becomes an issue as that becomes your only source of revenue. So that I'm not necessarily like that surprised about. I thought that was coming down the pike. I think I had made reference to it in previous videos, OG, that the hotel issue, that was coming up. To hear actual DeSantis talk about that today, no surprise right there.
It's not maybe not a surprise, but one of the big selling points for Florida is that you don't have the taxes and all that stuff that you have in California,
Correct.
And that's slowly going away.
And it is in order to, and as some lawmakers will actually attempt to counter with, it's because, well, you have let's say you have like 129,000 hotel rooms, right? We have a number of actual parks themselves. I think like is there like 8 in this vicinity now with Epic Universe coming online? And that has, you have tens of thousands of what they would call low-income earners and so forth. So we should invest that back into local communities and all that kind of stuff, right? There is an argument to be made for that. But like you said, OG, it's becoming a little bit more California in its description. Now, again, they're being taxed now. It's just that gets reinvested back into tourism. Could we actually spread that around? Lawmakers have made that argument a lot before. And I think again, I'm not a fan of taxing, people when they actually spend time at the hotels or even use the roads. So the surprising one was the road issue, right? The tolls on the roads. DeSantis has made some headway in eliminating or pulling back on toll roads in the state of Florida. It's interesting how we want to institute toll roads in and around the Walt Disney World area, and that wouldn't even just be limited to people, I would think, who are actually going into Walt Disney World, but people who are driving around it. But that's a surprising portion of this whole debate.
My only thing is, if this was something that was already kind of in the pipeline that they were considering, fine. I think it's more so the execution of how it is being presented.
Of course.
It's vindictive. And it's, really, Disney? Okay, well, we're just going to do toll roads now. And it's sloppy. This is so sloppy. You go on social media. I've had at least 3 different conversations today on Twitter about this with conservatives who are like, we're done with this shit. We are absolutely done with this shit. This is not a good look for DeSantis at all. I saw nobody, Democrat or conservative, saying, yeah, this is great, DeSantis. Yeah, go ahead and do the toll roads and the hotel tax and yada, yada, yada. It's a bad look. It's vindictive as hell. Like you said, Dre, he's trying to eliminate the toll roads. Now he's all about it because he wants to stick it to the mouse. And this game doesn't take you anywhere, DeSantis. Like, you're endlessly trying to one up and kneecap Disney is not going to benefit Florida, the people of Florida, tourism, or even Universal for that matter.
And
This is
that's
a bad
honestly
move.
and that's honestly just how politics works in general. Whether no matter what side you're on, whether you're red, blue, what have you have these two entities clashing. One side doing this to get ahead of the other. This one's getting back at this. And then here we are as the people sitting, looking with our hands in our pockets saying, what are we doing? So we're the ones that are getting hurt out of it, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and the toll road thing is like Dre mentioned, there could be some collateral damage with that, with other parts, right? Because like let's for example, if you put a toll road, let's say you made the 5 freeway a toll road, well, that's going to impact Knott's too, though. People take the 5 to get to Knott's Berry Farm as well. It's not just Disneyland. So I would imagine, I'm not really privy, honestly, full disclosure, not privy to all the freeways and everything around this area, but I would imagine that some of these freeways are used by both Disney and Universal. You put a toll road on this stuff, and it's going to hurt Universal.
Everybody, I think, wanted a realignment of the mutual benefit that exists between Disney and Florida, right?
Yes.
So it was, we don't necessarily want to hurt the mouse in terms of their business because everybody else benefits from it. Right. But we do want a kind of re-examination of the issues of taxes, for example, right? Or how much they actually are going to be benefiting the surrounding communities and the state itself. Right now, yes, Disney was given a sweetheart deal largely because they had developed the area, they were going to build a city and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, as time has progressed, it's become, okay, this is going to work in Disney's interests in order to develop this area, build the city, all that. It's now turned from that to this is a very sweetheart deal for Disney that not many get to benefit directly from, indirectly, obviously, but directly from in the form of taxes and other things. A reevaluation of that relationship, I think, is what everybody wanted, right? But you taxing even the hotels, but definitely the toll roads, now that's not necessarily hurting Disney, is it? Or at least it could, right, in the form of business, which will hurt everybody else, but also, too, it'll hurt the citizenry directly. It won't just be limited to tourists. There's no way in which you can. So that is a bizarre move. And to provide some context for this and where this kind of, like I said, this reevaluation has come from, I want to go ahead and read a couple of things here that provide a little bit of backdrop to this, right? There's another important benefit for Disney tucked inside the Reedy Creek's 92-page charter. Construction inside the district is exempt from certain taxes and fees added by the county governments after Reedy Creek was created. That means Disney doesn't pay impact fees. Those are the one-time payment developers make to offset the cost of public services like roads. The district pays for many of its own services like fire and maintenance for the roads inside its boundaries. But if Reedy Creek didn't exist, Disney would pay the fees like any other developer to Orange and Osceola counties. At one point, Disney's exemption from paying impact fees raised eyebrows from officials in Orange County. In the 1980s, county officials threatened to sue Disney over the constitutionality of the Reedy Creek Charter. Ultimately, the company and the local government came to an agreement in 1989, and Disney paid about $13 million for road improvements outside of its property. In exchange, Orange County agreed not to challenge Reedy Creek's charter for 7 years. When the agreement ended, Disney stopped paying those fees, and Orange County leaders haven't pushed the issue since. Disney is also immune from a tax that other property owners pay to fund law enforcement. If the company was required to pay the tax, it would total about $21.1 million in fiscal year 2020, according to an analysis by the Orange County Comptroller's Office. Instead, Reedy Creek will pay about $10.5 million in a contract with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. And that means Reedy Creek, and Disney by extension, that's a savings of about $10.6 million a year thanks to that tax exemption. So there are ways, right, to correct that a little bit that would make everybody, I think, happy, right? DeSantis isn't even employing those techniques, right? He is threatening to hurt the business of Disney directly. Right. That hurts everybody around them. And it's... I think people expected the tax to be levied against Disney that would ultimately be taken out on consumers, but it would tax Disney directly.
It's like the overall ideal of what it was supposed to be, but the execution brought on by DeSantis is completely obliterating of what the whole purpose was for in the first place.
Exactly.
And it's making it worse.
Well, and that's what I said in one of the videos we made about this whole Reedy Creek thing and the Disney move, right? The Disney agreement is that just because DeSantis can do something doesn't mean it's good for him to do this. Now, the toll roads, he's probably well within his right to do that, but is it necessarily a good move? Absolutely not. It's anti-business. It's anti-optics too. No one on Twitter, conservative or liberal, is cheering this thing on. It's a shit move.
And he's in a mindset right now because of how he is pursuing this. It's going to come out negatively. It's just like when you cook. I'll use that as an example. If you cook angry, your food is going to reflect on how you are feeling, how you are making said food. If you are a teacher, you're having a bad day, it can come across to your students that, it's showcasing of how you're teaching method, of how you are response in your emotions. This is how the same thing is with DeSantis, because of he has a bigger outlook, because he wants to come after Disney, and they kind of showed him up, and now it's like this cat and mouse type of high school type of thing, and it's like it's ridiculous.
He's getting sloppy though in his response now because he's panicking. Go ahead, Dre.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. I do apologize. I wanted to go over some of the responses to this, right? Because I know DG and everybody who's watching this video is going, wait a minute, hang on here. There's some stuff you can put in. So let's go ahead and address it. Just on the public, just on the optics level, right? This is bad, right? We've said this now a couple of times here. John Cooper says here, I've spoken with more than 100 residents of Central Florida, regular people and small business owners, and they're unanimously opposed to Ron DeSantis' ongoing feud with Disney. Nobody agrees with him, not a single person. Their feelings range from derision to frustration to outright anger. And that was before the latest news that DeSantis is looking at other punitive measures against Disney, including putting tolls on roads near Disney World. That's really going to piss off all of the Floridians who have to pay those tolls. What the F is DeSantis thinking? This is also giving political fodder to his political opponents here. This is per the Orlando Sentinel today. Democrats accuse DeSantis of wanting to increase costs for working class Floridians. Raising hotel taxes or putting tolls on roads will hurt consumers, not Disney, said State Rep Anna Escamani, Democrat from Orlando. Quote, it's hitting a point of absurdity, she said. It's not creating an even playing field. It's about DeSantis looking big and bad next to Disney.
Bingo.
He said if DeSantis wants accountability, he should urge the legislature to pass combined reporting for corporate income taxes that would prevent corporations from using tax avoiding accounting tactics, Escamani said. So Escamani, I believe her father, if I'm not mistaken, or their father, worked at Walt Disney World, and that representative has been referenced in previous Orlando Sentinel articles, looking at kind of the back and forth between the state and RCID as it has existed, and Disney, of course. Also said this. So we heard that DeSantis, through the legislature of Florida, might void the deal. Well, this is interesting, right? Disney could challenge DeSantis and the legislature in court if they move to void the development agreement on the grounds that they are invalidating an existing contract, said Jacob Schumer, a Central Florida attorney who specializes in local government law. If lawmakers single out Disney, the corporation could also argue that the action violates the Equal Protection Clause. He said, quote, if the legislature is targeting an existing contract and specifically impairs the contract, that is a constitutional problem. And I believe DG has put out there that I believe this is Article 1 of the Constitution right here, where the government can't impact on outstanding contracts. Going back and voiding a contract would be very difficult to defend in court. I would think Disney would have a much stronger case. Now, I don't know about that specifically, right? I had to get some more. I had to get a little bit more legal consultation on that. But you can see how messy this whole thing has become, right? You can see how taxing hotels, which has been part of the deal before, I mean, they're already getting taxed a certain amount. Why can't we change Florida legislation to allow for those taxes that are already being taken out to have for them to be used for more purposes than just inside the tourism industry? We could kind of negotiate those around.
I think so, but I think it's I think what rubs people the wrong way though is that this isn't coming from an organic place of like, let's readdress this. It's coming from they made me look bad.
It's
right.
hostility.
They made me look bad, so now we're gonna do it, right? So it just, I don't know.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's very, very messy. The tolls, right? I mean, that is terrible, terrible optics. At a time when he needs all the optics that he can receive, right? I mean, if he's really running for president in 2024, he really does need to kind of handle this in a way that separates him from the pack, right? And unfortunately, he isn't even doing that. He's getting terrible advice politically, and has handled this to a questionable degree. I'm going to go ahead and play some comments by Robert Barnes, who is a civil rights attorney, constitutional attorney, right, trial attorney, who brokered the deal originally between DeSantis and 45 for them to actually run together before that deal fell through, unfortunately, right? So he has had relationships in Tallahassee, relationships with the governor's office at one point. And, well, you know, I mean, some people were saying, oh, he's biased against DeSantis. Yeah, well, people are biased against Disney as well. They can comment on these issues just as well, utilizing their expertise, not just in law, but also the politics of the situation. And he says some things that are quite interesting. So 2 videos for you real fast from Robert Barnes. Here we go. I think this one.
What's going on with the DeSantis-Disney dispute? The problem was this. DeSantis said he was going to remove the power of Disney from having its own district. He then backed out of that and just changed the board of the district instead. Disney preempted that by because he had already delegated state power to them, they could write into certain contracts and agreements things that bind any future board. Right? If you didn't take away the power of the board, you weren't taking away the power of Disney. If you didn't take away the board itself, the district itself, you weren't going to change Disney or really make any difference at all. I mean, he talked big. He's all hat, no cattle these days, which he's been at times on COVID, as I'll talk about with Steve Dace on Thursday at 12:30 Eastern Time.
Nice.
And then no cattle.
All hat, no cattle. And he reiterates it here with a follow-up.
Changing the Reedy Creek board is taking over the power from Disney. Disney's previous board passed a language restricting the upcoming board. This will be challenged in court. Yeah, the problem is they can do that. See, the problem is as long as you gave Florida ongoing power to even have a special district, that special district's board could, through an HOA and other terms, limit the future board. And I get they can try to fight it out, but we'll see. I mean, once he capitulated on that, he had capitulated on the core issue. This is what I was trying to explain to people at the time. Put it this way, all the Hollywood observers knew this. People who knew the law, knew the political issues and followed in detail were like, oh, okay, this law doesn't mean much because they get to keep their real power, and there's a million ways for them to protect it. Changing the names on the board, or like changing the order of where you're sitting on the Titanic, made no difference. And DeSantis knew that, by the way.
Key.
I think he wanted political hay out of attacking Disney, but not the consequences of any meaningful change, which appears to be a pattern with him. Starting to develop into one. I mean, that grand jury was opened months ago. Why has there been no action on Big Pharma? Why have they not even reached out to Brooke Jackson? Okay, was it all for show? Increasingly, DeSantis looks like all hat, no cattle. Sorry, Dave Rubin. You got on the wrong horse.
Well, and credit to our boy Disney Glimpses when he was saying that this was just a board swap, and that's essentially what Barnes is saying. It's a board swap. It means nothing. It's like changing the chairs on the Titanic. It doesn't do anything, and that's fascinating, dude. That is absolutely fascinating.
Do you think that was just a notion on DeSantis's part to change the board members because of some of the ignorance that they have, like they had read over the contracts twice and yet it was overlooked, and it kind of made him look like a fool because he had appointed them to this task, so to speak. So now he's trying to just, even though it can't really necessarily do anything, but just for it to showcase in his mind to say, oh, I got rid of these people, I'm putting in a brand new set of people.
No, well, what Barnes is saying is that you got rid of Disney's board and DeSantis put his board in there. So DeSantis's board, that the guy who thinks that you can catch gay from the tap
if
water.
you drink the water.
Ron
yeah.
Perry,
Right.
I believe.
Ron Perry. Those people are
No,
staying.
he's still keeping them. Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
he's keeping
they're
his,
still there.
Okay.
he's keeping his team. When Barnes is saying they switched the board, he meant from the Disney board, the Reedy Creek board, to the new tourism.
Oh yeah. There's absolutely no. Yeah, that's.
And the idea was I think the thinking here was they preserve the power that was entrusted by the state legislative to the RCID, now the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, so that the board can utilize those powers. Problem is well, now they just can gift that power to Disney, which was pretty much the arrangement before, but without the board's input. So that is the issue here. Now, I kind of agree that there might be some problems with that, and there might be problems breaking that and so forth. Again, a judge to decide. We went over how Florida courts, they're a little bit biased towards the governor's mansion, let's say, right? But the way that DeSantis is responding to this doesn't look good. It just doesn't. Now, if you want to say levy taxes against Disney directly, well, that's one story. If you want to say that we're going to pass legislation in order to divvy up the percentages of those taxes that are already in place, specifically with hotels, okay, that's something, right? Doing it in this way right here.
See how he's even discussing it. He has such hostility and such anger in his voice when, like, just the thought of him saying the word Disney.
It does contain a vindictiveness that I think DeSantis wanted to separate himself from and say, hey, this is all about an equal playing field. But it looks more punitive and vindictive as this goes along here.
Well, Andre, you mentioned this many times. There used to be a motto at Disney that we can be greedy, but we can't be nakedly greedy, right? This is the kind of thing that DeSantis is kind of running into right now. It's like before you can be retaliatory, but you can't be nakedly retaliatory. Okay, now he's getting into a personal, very overt, like, no, I'm absolutely taking this personal and I'm gonna fuck over the mouse. That's basically the energy now. It's not even like trying to like hide it in any way. It's just like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to hurt this company because I got my feelings hurt, you know?
It's what it looks like. But even the way, like, it would be one thing if it was like that energy with a tax against Disney. I think that would be perceived differently than we're going to do tolls and a hotel tax. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's now indirect hurting Disney, starting with the consumer, and that could be Florida residents as well. It's like that's a dumb way to go about that right there. Now, look. Anything that's punitive against Disney themselves, right, will be experienced by the consumer. I think everybody kind of understands and appreciates that, right? But it's really different optically to toll the roads that people use to in and around Disney than it is to tax Disney directly. That's a way different thing. And man, just really bad advice. We had talked about how he was getting just all kinds of bad advice now that he had been. Let's say his circle of political advisors have included some maybe more establishment figures throughout the years, right? Some politically undesirables, let's say, as it were, right? And how they're getting through, to him through his wife Casey DeSantis and all this kind of stuff. But to this right here, oh man, this is making him look worse and worse and worse and harder to defend.
Absolutely,
in the court of public opinion.
Absolutely, and here's the other thing too: it puts into question what kind of options he even has, because the toll road thing feels like such a move of desperation. Like, I don't have a lot of options here, so this is all I got. I'm gonna do this. Like, it doesn't. if you have all these options, like he claims, like he's getting up here on the podium, oh, we're gonna nullify and yada yada yada. If you really had that in your back pocket, then why are you going for the toll roads and stuff? It seems like the toll roads are like we're out of options and like fuck it, we'll just have to do the toll roads, I guess. That's what it looks like, at least from an outsider looking in. I could be wrong, but you don't do the toll road thing if you have all these legal maneuvers you can do against the mouse directly. It seems a little weird to me.
It does. Maybe the chat who comments on this video down below tell
Absolutely.
us, is the usage of toll roads and the implementation of them, or the removal of them, is that just within the executive branch's purview? I thought that was more of a legislative thing, but it might just be an executive branch thing, which is, I guess, how he was able to suspend toll road collection at a certain point here in the last couple of years. I wonder if it's like, this is one of my methods I can use, I'm going to use it kind of thing, right? We've also seen here, this is from Bob Hazen, from WESH, Florida Attorney General's office makes public records requests to former Disney-appointed Reedy Creek board members focused on the development agreement and restrictive covenant undercut the law, giving DeSantis power over the board. So we've seen this, right? But there was also a formal request made to the, I believe, the Chief Inspector General of Florida to inquire, to make their own inquiry into the let's say the communications or negotiations between the former RCID and Disney right now. So we know that's coming out of his office as well. Like I said, this seems to be, it's either strategic in that it's a kind of a multi-front right here, or it could be throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And look, it could be DeSantis is just kind of, throwing this out just to kind of feel it amongst his base right here, and maybe he'll switch tact as this response actually comes in. We'll see. But even if that were the case, man, does it make him look really, really bad. This is not the sharp precision that we've seen from DeSantis.
Not to mention, this whole stunt was for him to kind of gain recognition for a potential
presidential
political run.
Right.
You know, so I mean, yeah, this isn't looking good for him in the long term. No, it hasn't. Yeah, and it just seemed like it's just like dwindling down. And again, it's like the mind power was, okay, I'm going to utilize this as a potential political statement, and it just gone so wrong. And it's like, you know, how is this going to look in the polls if he does decide to run?
There are ways to handle this now. For example, like what we had discussed previously, OG, if they wanted to tax this agreement in a special way, hey, you can, carry on with this agreement. We're just going to have to pay for the privileges. That could be something to bring up. I think it was Valiant Renegade or Legal Mindset on one of their streams. They were saying, I think Legal Mindset gave this advice where it was like, okay, the board should just do what it does, right, and have Disney themselves battle it in court, right, sue them for their actions as part of the board. That's an interesting idea. That's an interesting pursuit. I think there are ways to handle this. The executive route with an inquiry, it's interesting, but this is not, I think, what people envisioned. When this fight started, remember, as Barnes eloquently put, it was, we're going to get rid of this board, right? And we're going to get rid of Disney's special privileges.
Right.
Disney still has their privileges, and they still have their district, basically. I didn't mean board, I said district.
Right.
When this was started, it was like, we're going to eliminate the special district, and we're going to remove Disney's special privileges. Disney still has both, technically. Right? And now it's all these other things that kind of are kind of around this issue of, I think, what a lot of Floridians resonated with, which was an inequitable relationship between Disney and Florida.
Well, and you're seeing, and you brought up, Dre, right now, a couple of options that he could go in, potentially, right? You mentioned the Legal Mindset's approach and the other one. Okay, right? And those would be much better, at least optic-wise, if those are options. Those are much better optic-wise. It's like, what you're seeing, I think, from DeSantis is someone who gets rattled like in a debate, right? Like a debate opponent who's like, they know they're losing and they start to make really sloppy mistakes and dig the hole further. They're digging their hole even deeper. And that's what I feel here. DeSantis is not focusing and thinking about this in a strategic way. He's thinking, I'm embarrassed. I got to do something. And he's just acting. And it's sloppy, and
which is weird because you had the power of the states, like, and you had the legislature in your pocket. Like, why wouldn't you? I don't know, come up with a strategy that is a little bit, a little bit better suited for this particular situation, and also makes you look good optically. Like you said, OG, it's like he's on his heels a little bit.
Yeah,
and that's revelatory. With that kind of action, right? It's like it's revealing, oh, do you necessarily have this strong foot that you've put out there? Now, I think they do. It's just they haven't necessarily utilized that power just yet. We'll see if they do.
Yeah. I don't see the confidence in the actions, but maybe they got it. Who knows? But
and this is just going to keep going. Like this isn't the end of it. We're going to hear a lot more coming out on both sides. Yep.
No, it's not.
well, it was kind of, because we both kind of agreed even before this that the board was going to kind of. This wasn't completely over.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But it would have been within the confines of the district, not the governorship in Florida or the presidential race in 2024. Now, all of that is relitigated with the legislative and the judicial getting involved potentially as well.
It's wild, man.
So the battle of the double D's continue. It just keeps going on and on.
The double D's.
That's it's fantastic, George. Thank you.
Yes, folks, we only have high-class stuff on this show.
There we go. And it's been a circus. It has.
Indeed.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today as part of Citrus Corner of the OG 55 Network. It's been a phenomenal show. A lot of juicy topics we tackled, and we definitely want to hear from you, all our listeners and viewers. Comment down below. Anything that we discussed upon, throw in your opinions, thoughts, ideas. We love to hear from you. We definitely take your feedback wholeheartedly. We always incorporate them in future shows, and we just love hearing from you. We love the interaction. We love the fan base that this channel has created. So definitely please do so. And to close it out, I'm going to start down below. Mr. Vash Sky, Dre the DA, Dr. Dre. Where could everyone find you on social media, sir? And thank you so much for joining today on Citrus Corner.
Absolutely. Hey, I do appreciate it. How could I miss talking about a Walt Disney World, everything RCID, Florida politics? It's all it's fantastic. Okay, but thank you so much for inviting me, George. I really do appreciate it. If anybody wants to go ahead and follow me, you can go do so right down there at Vash Sky. Just go ahead and type that in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion right there. I haven't heard from her. That's a very interesting thing, right? We were hearing all about her, and now not a whisper. So that's interesting. We're gonna have to follow that story, indeed, right? But if you guys want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right here at Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows, just like the one we just recorded, actually, with Jay from Story Geeks, talking about not only this last episode of Mandalorian, but also some other things going on in Lucasfilm, and maybe how well Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny will actually do in theaters as it's tracking and so forth. So you definitely want to go ahead and take a look at that. Citrus Corner with George, as we've just gone over. An amazing show, by the way, George. All credit goes to you. If you want to go ahead and see more of that, that's more of an emphasis to hit that subscribe button right there. The amazing Orange Nerd and Orange Grove shows, as hosted by the person above me right here, the amazing brother friend, which these two amazing people are. Again, you want to go ahead and subscribe, folks. These are the things that you want to see, including my own show, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove.
Thank you very much.
There we go. There we go.
And of course, all of this, everything that Mr. Vashkai had mentioned, none of this would be possible without the OG of the OG 55 crew, Mr. Orange Grove 55 himself. Thank you so much, sir, for joining today on Citrus Corner, and also thank you for again giving us this platform that we can showcase all these wonderful shows to our viewers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you guys. I love you guys. You guys are my brothers. It's always a good time talking shop with you guys. George, it was fantastic talking Walt Disney World, Reedy Creek, Genie Plus, all that good stuff. And to celebrate Star Wars Celebration, which is happening right now this whole weekend, I got a little Star Wars drop.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
may the Force be with you all. George, take it away, brother.
Thank you very much. And thanks again, everyone, for joining Citrus Corner. And I'm going to kind of go back to my Disney family man roots here that I always say, stay healthy, stay safe, stay Disney. Take care, everybody.